Hello, and welcome to the Trans-Icelandic Broadcasts, your grapevine podcast for all things trans-related. I'm Andy Fontaine.
I'm Cyborg Ninja, the current treasurer of Trans Iceland.
Oh yes, my title is news editor at the Reykjavik Grapevine. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about representation. But before, and by that we mean like the depictions of trans people in movies and television, in visual media, as it were. And before we dive into this, I want to send out a little shout out to the viewers and listeners out there. Is that we would really like to have a trans-masculine or non-binary person on our podcast. We've been asking around as well. We know a lot of you have been asking about it as well. And so if you're watching and you're listening and you yourself are trans-masculine or non-binary or know someone who is, you can contact us at the email that is provided in the article where this podcast is listed. You can also send it to andy@grapevine.is. Andy's being spelled A-N-D-I-E, not Andy, with a Y at the end.
Yeah.
So
it should hopefully also be in the description of the podcast episode if you subscribe to the feed.
Yes, it'll be there too.
Cool.
It'll absolutely be there too. Because we are talking about representation after all, and we've had 3 episodes now speaking from a trans femme point of view. This is because that's our lived experience. I cannot speak for trans-masculine folks. I'm also non-binary, but as I hew towards the femme spectrum of non-binariness, it just we would like more voices, basically.
Yeah, it's important. Otherwise, it's not good representation.
Precisely. Speaking of representation, that is the topic of today's podcast. Now, to begin with, we'd like to discuss why representation, like positive trans representation, is important in forms of media. Like something that comes up like in video games especially.
Yeah.
It's like, why does this character have to be trans?
Why do I have to have pronouns? This game is horrendous. I want a refund, which is happening right now because a Pokemon clone has asked you for your pronouns. Yeah. Yeah. It's important. Yeah, but it's kind of like going off topic. Yeah. Representation is really important because I remember growing up that the first time I realized I was seeing some kind of trans representation was watching Ace Ventura, which is pretty horrifying. As for those who haven't seen the movie, she's treated as a man. She's at least played by a woman. That's a bonus. And her genitalia and deception and stuff is it's just so they can make gross jokes on our expense.
Yes.
The big twist of the movie. It's
I'm slightly older than Cyborg, and they very slightly,
tiny bit.
And the first representation of a trans person that I remember from visual media is the movie Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks. There's a scene in this movie where this one guy in their circle of friends hooks up with this woman and loses his virginity to her, and he's very delighted until he goes to the bathroom and she follows him and proceeds to pee standing up at the toilet, after which he is absolutely horrified. His reaction to this is to tear off his clothes. He rushes into the shower. He's scrubbing his nether regions vigorously, and watching this as a child, it sends a very clear message that trans people are gross and they're freaks, and if you have any kind of intimacy with them or anything to do with them, then you are sullied by the experience. But underneath of all, it's as you say, that trans people are a joke.
Yeah.
And I'm only 10% a joke. So it's really important to it's really important to have positive representation, because these types of depictions, especially if you watch them uncritically, can kind of embed the idea, or I would rather say reinforce the idea, that trans people are laughable at best and disgusting at worst, which is used as justifications for violence.
Yeah, it really paves the way for violence and further violence and murder.
Yes. Like, to make it clear, I'm not contending that the movie Bachelor Party was telling viewers to kill trans people. What I am saying, though, is that when you reinforce this idea that we're freaks of nature and disgusting, when you get this message enough times, it becomes embedded into a person's outlook towards trans people. They become conditioned to think in this way. And so if they already have violent tendencies to begin with, they become much more likely to act on them towards us. And that's absolutely not a good thing. But even like violence aside, I would still like to be able to like go about my day without being interacted with as if I'm some kind of freak. I'm just another girl on the street. I'm actually a rather boring person, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's why it matters. Positive representation matters for this reason. Well, another reason I would say would have to do with trans kids.
Yeah, like just being able to see yourself, like having a mirror to see yourself, like, because if you don't have a mirror, if you don't have anyone to see yourself in media, in stories, you start to feel apart from society. It alienates you.
Yes.
It
alienates you, and you feel very alone in the world.
Yeah.
Depending on where you live. I mean, maybe you live in a type of community that's got a very thriving and vibrant and public queer community, but not a lot of people do, and so to be able to see positive representation of yourself, especially if you're in a surrounding where you don't see very many trans people in your everyday life, I mean, this could literally save the lives of trans kids, because it's that type of alienation and detachment and deep loneliness that can contribute to depression and isolation, self-harm, and attempts at taking one's own life, as it were. So positive representation can prevent violence against trans people, and it can save the lives of trans kids. And with that in mind, we're going to go over some examples, both bad and good, of representation of trans people in the visual media. Starting with bad. Yeah.
I've never seen Transparent. And the big reason behind that being that Jeffrey Tambor is playing the lead, a cis woman. A trans woman.
So a cis man is playing a trans woman?
Yeah. Which is like gross. I don't want to see it. And it helps that in later years it turns out that he is a gross person who does gross things to women. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's really shitty. I really only put it on the list to serve as like a bridge to Trans America, because it's also has like the cis person playing a trans person, but like this time it's at least a woman playing a woman, just a step up, I guess. Yeah, and that movie, like Transparent, got like loads of awards, and Felicity, bad at bribing her kids into college, Huffman, got nominated for an Oscar for her performance as a woman, which is very, very brave.
Yes. And if I could interject for just a moment about like why it is that we have a problem with cis actors playing trans people.
We don't get those roles. We don't get trans roles, and we definitely don't get cis roles unless like we're going stealth.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big thing. It's just like that the few roles that exists out there tend to go to people who don't belong to, that aren't us. It's like it's a lot like when they hire white people to play people of other races.
Yes.
It's almost exactly like that, and
I'd say it's parallel to that in any ways.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that's definitely my beef with it too. I mean, it's hard enough for any actor starting out to get into a casting call. If you're trans, the deck is stacked against you. So yes, it's a bit unfair that like cis actors who already have an advantage over us can get cast to play us, whereas those of us who actually have the lived experience and could lend something more authentic than, say, Scarlett Johansson could to the role, get passed up. This has been changing though, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
So, cinema in general.
Yeah, it's just been really bad at representing trans men. It just I did like a bit of a search, and I only found non-English speaking movies that had like a trans man character at least central enough to like be notable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just except for Boys Don't Cry with Hilary Swank, which is like just like the same thing as Trans America, a vehicle for cis actors to get recognition and awards on the backs of lived trans experiences. And
yes, and that's a really I'm really glad that you brought up Boys Don't Cry in particular, because the reporting that movie is based on, like the reporter themselves, like later retracted huge chunks of that story about like their depiction of the person in question, and the movie is based on that reporting. So the the Brendan Tina that you see in Boys Don't Cry is based on bad reporting, because that's just something that happens a lot of time, unfortunately. It's an incredibly difficult film to watch for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the things that must be kept in mind when you do watch it. I mean, Close Venue is brilliant, as almost always.
Yeah.
Hilary Swank is, I don't know what to say. It's a movie based on bad reporting of a person who was real, who lived, and met an untimely, violent death. And I think Brendan Tina deserved better.
Absolutely. I'd also like to mention the Yakuza series, which like does a really good job, reportedly from like people living in Japan and Japanese people, of like recreating the texture. And with that comes like the local form of trans misogyny, and and like even though like playing the games, like these are games that are really like dear to my heart, even though like they're trying to like be like sympathetic and like empathetic and like being thoughtful about their presentation, it often fails. There's a protagonist in the fourth game that like constantly misgenders the only like notable trans person up to that point.
I see.
When I talk about her, and it just drove me mad. And like the following game, like they have like a bit better presentation there, representation there. Like there's this makeup guru who's guiding a growing like a fledgling idol star. So like, okay, things are getting better. And then I play like the next game in the series, which is a prequel, like in the 80s. And it's the most offensive trans woman I've ever heard. Like, she's a sexual predator. She just looks like a man in a dress. And it's really bad. But thankfully, Sega, who releases these games, like they do take like queer rights very seriously, and they're like, I think last time I knew, like they were the most progressive in regarding to like working conditions for their queer employees in Japan. So like, and they're like re-releasing these games now, and they're like cutting a lot of stuff because like they got it wrong, and they just they don't want to keep on pushing it. So
okay,
yeah, so it's like bad representation, like what you can do about it, like just you can't remove it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can be.
Yeah.
I wanted to, in terms of bad representation, I wanted to talk about the movie Girl.
Yes.
Because this is a complicated thing to get into. Girl is the story of a 15-year-old trans girl who is also a ballerina. And they were really excited about hormone replacement therapy because when the movie starts, there's puberty blockers are pretty much all that's on the table, and about getting surgery. And this movie is based on a person's actual life story, an actual trans girl, a trans woman, pardon me, who is now a trans woman today. And now this movie has been heavily criticized by other trans people. However, the real life subject of the film has defended it, saying like, I'm happy with this representation. I'm happy with what the director's done. And so when I watched this film and was frankly appalled by some of the choices the director made, I felt I had to tread very carefully because, I mean, far be it from me to tell another trans person how their story should be told. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if she was happy with the representation, that's all fine and good. But I feel as though I can still take issue with some of the choices the director made. Amongst them that, once again, we've got a cis actor, a boy, playing a trans girl. And secondly, another theme, and this is a very common theme in trans stories, this movie is about pain, it's about misery, it's about violence against the body. These are themes that are woven into it repeatedly, like from like little things to the fact that she's starting to learn en pointe in ballet a couple years too late. And so she's doing all these very painful exercises to her feet and legs. Whereas at the same time, when she goes in for her interview about getting bottom surgery, the doctor goes into like great detail about everything that could possibly go wrong. And that's the only part of that interview that we hear. This is a persistent theme, not only throughout this movie, but in pretty much, well, not pretty much all, but like very, very many trans stories. It's about violence and pain and hurt and depression and, like, come on. Like, this is, the pain that we experience in our day-to-day lives is due to transphobia. Being trans is not in and of itself a painful thing. If anything, I've never felt happier in my entire life since coming out. I feel like my real self. I feel free. I feel liberated. The only time that being trans is ever miserable to me is when I experience transphobia. Okay? Like, I have bouts of dysphoria as well, like facial dysphoria in particular. But, I mean, I get over that. And there are things that I'm doing to try to get over that. Most of the time, the experience of being trans, if transphobia did not exist, the experience of being trans would be completely positive. But it's this lopsided representation of the pain and misery and anguish of being trans that I'm frankly getting really exhausted with, you know?
Yeah, it's the problem with the cis version of the trans narrative.
Yes.
It's the lack of actual understanding and and really, like, these stories are made for cis people to enjoy.
Yeah.
And they are not made with consideration to what trans people might want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like these stories tend to be like these warning stories, like the boy who cried wolf.
Mm-hmm.
So it's horrible.
That is a really good point. That like a lot of these like really do feel like cautionary tales.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine like you're you know, like you're questioning your gender identity, or perhaps you already decided you're trans but you haven't come out yet, but you're surrounded by this message that stepping out and being openly trans is to invite upon yourself physical harm to your body. It's to like invite all kinds of host of health problems, and you're going to feel isolated, alone, and everyone's going to pick on you, and you're going to get beat up in a public bathroom. Like, these are things trans people experience. No question. These are things that trans people experience. What I take issue with is the lopsided representation of the trans lived experience. I see very little joy. I feel very little happiness and love and liberation and feeling fully manifested as your real self, which are also parts of the trans experience, but you hardly know that if all you learned about the trans experience was from watching movies and television shows by cis people about trans people.
Yeah.
Rant over. I'm a happy girl. What can I say? But yeah,
I would just like to add, like, this is absolutely like the same thing as kill your gays trope, where like every gay representation kind of ends up with, like, if there's a gay relationship in media, like one of them is bound to die more or less.
mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Or have a substance abuse problem.
Yeah, or both.
Yeah.
Typically both.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah. So
because queer people are often just like accessories to the hetero characters. Looking at you, Sex in the City.
Cautionary tales.
Yes.
Those are the real cautionary tales. Like, if we don't look out, we'll just wind up as accessories to people, which I've been asked to be.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, cis het people see, like, queer accessories, and then they start, like, trying to accessorize with queer people.
Yeah.
It's
dehumanizing.
Yeah.
Like, we're like actual, like, fully formed human beings. Not like, you know, a box you tick off to have a trans friend or a queer friend. It is a bit much at times.
Yeah.
So leading into this, now that we've kvetched sufficiently, I think video games, like, I mean, that would be a whole podcast in itself when it comes to video games.
Yeah.
I will say, and I think it bears mentioning, that Pokemon has always been great.
Yeah, they have. I'm really happy for the black belt who like decided to just go through with it, go through her transition and stop being a black belt. And fuck, I can't recall what her new job is, but like, there's a character in the new Pokemon, like one prior, who's like, yeah, I used to be a black belt, but if you like have played any Pokemon game, you know that all black belts are boys.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah.
Not to mention the Pokemon monsters themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I think I saw somewhere, I don't remember the exact percentage, but most Pokemon, the plural of Pokemon, by the way, is not Pokemon or Pokemons. It's still Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And I will die on this hill.
It's a shortening of Pocket Monster.
Yes. Pokémons.
Yeah. Pokemons. That's the plural.
The vast majority of them are genderless. They are agender. But you can also, when you capture them, because I have a Nintendo DS, and so I'm playing Pokemon Black, and one of my favorite things to do is when I capture a Pokemon, because they usually have that little Mars or Venus symbol next to their name, is I assign them if they got a Mars, I'll assign it with Venus. If they're Venus, I'll assign it with Mars. And if they're neither, I'll just leave them alone. Mm-hmm. And I find this a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Personally.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
And they're okay with it. They're definitely okay with it. But the humans in the game, yes. The black belt that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's important. And so, on to good examples of trans representation in visual media. And going back to trans masculine folks.
Yeah, I would like to call out, like, at first, the OA. Because, like, yeah, they have a very, very good, like, Buckboo is a trans boy in those shows played by Ian Alexander, and yeah, like, he's trans, like, he deals with some, like, specific trans issues, but that's not the meat of his character.
Correct.
The meat of his character is someone who feels disenfranchised, like, kind of lost in life, and he finds, like, and yeah, there's this found family he finds and follows, and it's
absolutely.
yeah, it's a kind of trans narrative we don't see a lot of, and it's super nice.
I think it also bears mentioning, since we had talked about casting
Yeah.
earlier, that the creator specifically sent a shout out for a high school aged trans masked person
Yeah.
and actually got people lining up to audition.
Tons.
So just putting it out there that like, and yeah, he put in a stellar performance.
Yeah. Like both seasons, and I won't go into spoilers for this, but like there's like part of the second season who like which like made a ruckus in the trans community, but like they handle it well, I think. And yeah, it's the kind of show that like you don't want to know anything about and kind of just.
But it's very good.
It's so good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, even though it's about a cis white lady.
Yeah, but she has powers.
Yeah.
And you've got She-Ra here.
Yeah, because it's great. It has the latest season introduced Double Trouble, which is just the most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful independent villain. Like
Yes.
they're just their own faction in this whole game, and it's
This is true. Double Trouble is a non-binary character, and they use they, them, their pronouns.
Yeah.
Other characters refer to them as they, them, and their.
There is never like any like thought of like, oh, that's strange. Why do you? No, like people in She-Ra just like they're just cool with it, and that's also like a part of the representation that I think matters. Is just like showing a society that's cool with it, and that's great. Like that doesn't affect anything. There's also like little tiny details in She-Ra that aren't like maybe called out, but like the fact that Bo has two dads, they have lots of kids, and Bo looks like his dads. So like, I don't think their kids are adopted.
That's a fair point. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
But yes, regardless, I think it is like an excellent point that like Double Trouble's non-binariness is not introduced with some long prologue where it's like explained in elementary terms. People just take it as a given. Okay, they are Katra's friend, and they're not to be trusted.
Yeah, like Katra.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. Yeah, some friends are not good friends. She-Ra teaches us, which is.
This is true.
Yeah.
I could talk for hours about She-Ra personally. I follow like 6 different queer specific She-Ra pages. Like there's one specifically for Adora, there's one for Glimmer, there's one for the horse, and there's a new one for Double Trouble, and there's a couple others as well.
I follow our Iceland's own Katra on Twitter.
Oh.
Because Katra is now a legal Icelandic name. Just have to have the K instead of the C.
Yes.
Well, it's like super dope. Yeah, like She-Ra seems to have like found like a really strong base in the trans community, and I think that's telling about like why that's a good world to spend time in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would also like to shout out to Pose, because that like even though we're like trying to like focus on trans masked non-binary folks, Pose just has like a lot of black and brown trans women and non-binary femmes in the show, and it's just like, even though it's like very much like it goes into the misery and hardship, it also goes into the joy and community and love and life. And even though I didn't enjoy the beach episode because I think it was placed in a bad place, like the rest of the series is one of the best television that's being made today. And
beach episodes are never good anyway. Anime taught me that.
No, some of the beach, you have to see the Sergeant Frog beach episode. It's pretty much the best. There are several, and they're all the best, and I will not hear this.
Okay. All right, I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. I'd like to mention Sense8.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
Because yes, we do have there's a trans woman, played by a trans woman, and her transness is like early in the show it's important in a way, but it's just used as a segue to reveal that they're one of like these 8 higher evolved human beings, as it were. Like the main thing about Nomi, the character in Sense8, is that she's a hacker.
Yeah.
Like that's the central focus of her character.
Which is good trans representation, because a large portion of trans women are hackers or programmers. So
yes.
Like
this is true.
This is very good representation.
Yeah. I mean, there's some interaction with her, and the interaction with her parents is really interesting too.
So good, yeah.
You know?
Like, yeah.
Like, mom is awful. Mom is just awful.
The worst.
And her dad, like, is just spineless. Like, he's accepted, like, he has a daughter, but he's too spineless to stand up to his wife most of the time.
Yeah.
In any event. But yeah, Sense8 is one of my favorite science fiction shows.
Absolutely, yeah. I came really late to it. Like I tried to watch the first episode when it like just came out, and just like didn't click for me.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think it was like a year ago. I like watched all of it, and it was.
I'm surprised. So much of it is filmed in Iceland. I thought every Icelander watched this show.
Like I've never like gone for that thing. Like it kind of scares me away, because I just. Yeah, like Icelanders have a tendency to go like very nationalistic whenever we're in anything, and it kind of squicks me out. So I have to give these things like space before I enjoy them.
Yes.
So I don't get caught up with Nazi fervor.
That's important.
Yeah. I also like that in Sense8 they open just with a trans woman having hot lesbian sex, and that's just like her introduction. She's living her life, and it's great.
It is great,
and that's how it. Yeah.
And you got Titans here.
Yeah, Titans. I was really excited last year when I found out that Chella Man, a deaf trans model, got a role on Titans as a character called Jericho, who I didn't know anything about before I watched the TV show. It was good. Like they don't mention any at all. Like it isn't referenced at all that Jericho is trans. So like this might be a case of a trans actor playing a cis character. Like it isn't specified, and I think that's good. I think that's fine. I think it's good that the actor himself is trans.
Absolutely.
And also deaf, like, which is like really fucking good.
And again, I'm sure like this may have been what casting was looking for.
Yeah.
As well, we need a trans deaf character in the show, and still got replies.
Yeah.
You know, like I know when I talk about Sense8, like Jamie Clayton has been in numerous media before she played Nomi in Sense8, because Jamie Clayton's a professional, you know, and she's been in the business a long time. But it's really good to see, such as in the OA, newcomers coming into the scene.
Yeah. And yeah, it was actually really cute, because I follow both Chella and Ian Alexander, who plays Buck, on Twitter, and like they met at some like red carpet thing, and it was just really fucking. It was really fucking heartwarming to see like these two like non-white trans men just like discovered being on the red carpet. It's like it's good in the heart.
It is. It's very heartwarming.
Yeah. My only complaint about Titans is that like it suffers from some negative tropes, but it's in general it's quite good.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll have to give that.
yeah. I recommend it. Yeah.
I'll give that a watch. Speaking of shows I've been meaning to watch,
You have to watch the Chilling Adventures or Tales of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, because that show is really good. And there's a non-binary actor on the show called Lachlan Watson, who's playing Theo, a young trans boy. No, they're on the cusp of adulthood, so it gets I get my terminology confused.
so the actor is non-binary, but the character is transmasc?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And
I mean, there is a such thing as non-binary mask too.
yeah.
Like I'm non-binary femme.
Yeah.
So, but the character is expressly binary transmasc.
He's a boy.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
He's a boy.
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate this, Andy.
Yeah. I don't.
Yes.
They don't really interrogate his gender.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I get so focused on these little details. I guess.
Yeah. There are transphobes in town. Like there always are. But like there's like a core found family support love that Theo gets, and it's good. There's like stuff in the second series that like have rubbed some folks the wrong way. But like me and my non-binary housemate, like we were both like very pretty like this is obviously not my story, but like we understood it in a good way. Yeah, because I don't want to get really into the nitty-gritty of anything, because I'm always terrified. I don't want to hurt the spoiler crowd. I don't want to hurt their emotions or watching habits.
Is there 3 seasons out now or 2?
Yeah, there's a third season that just came out on the beginning of the new moon.
How fitting.
Yeah, it's very fitting. I only know because I live with a witch, so it's yeah. I haven't finished it yet, but so far it's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
I enjoyed. Yeah, I actually snuck a non-visual medium thing on here.
Okay.
Because I'm a sneaky person, and that's just what I do. I would like to shout out to Friends at the Table, an actual play podcast focused on critical world building.
Oh.
If you don't know what an actual play podcast is, it's when some role-playing nerds come together and play role-playing games. Like this podcast is, yeah, it's like very focused on like making like these really concrete, fitting world like feel lived in, and just like spending times to like being critical in like how they play their characters and such, which is super nice. 2 members of the cast are trans. One of them is a trans woman or non-binary person. I don't know. Like they're still on their path. She's still on her path. And one of them is non-binary as well. And the composer, his name is their name is Jack the Keat. And they do really, really good work. There is a season of the show where there is not a single cishet character on the like pretty large cast. Like everyone is queer. And yeah, like there is queer representation there, but it doesn't really focus on the transness of anybody. They make worlds where people just have like different relationships to gender, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this, there's this art collective called My Barbarian, and they made a splash on the internet in 2004 with this music video called Unicorns LA.
Ooh.
And this video depicts Dungeons and Dragons and live action roleplay. And in an interview with one of the members of this collective, they spoke at length about how Dungeons and Dragons helped them get in touch with their queerness. And I can see that because like, I was really into Dungeons and Dragons as a kid myself, long before I realized I was trans, and kind of realized I was queer though. And definitely so. Like when you can explore other like identities and other ways of being and other ways of living, you begin to look into yourself and ask yourself questions about like, how could I be living? You know, what identities can I explore and who am I really? You know, it really makes you question who you really are in a lot of ways. I know I'm getting a little bit philosophical, but Dungeons and Dragons seems to speak to queer people, and I think that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah, thankfully, like I don't really like Dungeons and Dragons because there's been a lot said about its problems and it really being built on the bones of colonialism. But there's a lot of like good, like explicitly queer like role playing stuff coming out now, like like games about like creating like this queer like following like queer families after the apocalypse, character creation that like is like specifically goes into like, oh, here's like how do you express your gender, like how do you identify, like really like focus in on these things that like have to do with identity instead of how good are you at killing minority people and taking their stuff to gain experience.
Yes,
I have issues with D&D, like a lot of people.
Totally fair.
Yeah,
totally fair. I haven't played D&D. For the record, I haven't played D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, in decades. But I think that like any sort of fantasy role play, in general, is going to appeal to queer people in general.
Oh yeah, yeah.
For sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So closing out, stuff we wish we could see more of.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd love to see more success stories, more happy endings.
Yes.
Without a doubt. You know, that's just as the inverse to the extended rant that I went on about the lopsided nature of trans representation in the media.
Yeah.
I want to see trans people win.
Yeah.
You know? Like, you just, to win, to like live good lives and to come out on top, despite everything. Stories where a character's transness is completely incidental. We had listed a few examples in good representation.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen a recent article that made an excellent point about celebrating trans mediocrity.
Yes.
You know?
Like, I think the secretary, and I forget her name because she's just doing her in Jessica Jones. Like,
yes.
Because she's just doing her fucking job and she doesn't have time for this fucking drama because she's leading her fucking normal ass life.
Mm-hmm. Like their transness is completely
incidental.
It's not a part of the story necessarily.
Yeah.
Like no more than like, you know, a cis woman's womanhood is a part of a story.
Yeah.
Like Jessica Jones like is a woman, but her being a cis woman is not really the core of Jessica Jones' story.
Yeah.
The core of Jessica Jones' story is that she's a fucking badass and a private detective.
With PTSD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who drinks really heavily.
Yeah.
Like, these are interesting things about Jessica Jones. But her being a cis woman, like, is not the core of Jessica Jones' story, necessarily. And it would be nice to see, you know, trans characters have the same type of treatment.
Yeah.
Personally.
I very much agree. I think, like Supergirl, like, they introduced a trans character last season, and like at first it felt like very focused on it had like a focus on her transness. Like her transness became like a way for her to like go like she used her transness to make people to make people be better, and she suffered from transphobia and stuff like. And like I haven't seen like much of Supergirl this season, but like it seems like she's just moving on to dealing with an annoying boyfriend. Which is nice, like that. Her story is just that, like, yeah, my boyfriend is
Speaking of trans mediocrity.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, she's a superhero, but like she's like the sidekicky role that kind of just like gets kicked when the main villain comes in to show that he means business. And
yes, indeed.
yeah, and her boyfriend's kind of annoying, and he loves her, but it's like, wow, learn some social cues, boy. And that's that's nice.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of the of earlier in this podcast, when we were talking about bad representation, about how there's so many cis people playing trans characters. What about trans actors playing cis people?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be super cool. I'm hoping that Ryan Murphy's next thing, whatever that's gonna be, like in the O.J. Simpson Versace line. I've heard some rumblings that it's gonna be like the impeachment. Like, I want Angelica Ross to play someone. Like, there's the connect. Like, it could happen. Like, I'm holding out hope here.
I mean, there are examples of this, but there should be more.
Way
because
more.
This again, like one good element of representation is normalization.
Yeah.
Like if you normalize that trans actors can play trans people where their transness is not central to their role. When you normalize that trans actors can play cis people, like it sends a very positive message to everybody.
Yeah.
It normalizes transness, and it's also like very comforting and supportive and encouraging to trans people who are not yet out and are trying to work up the courage to get out.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it looks like this is the time that we have. But I want to reiterate the shout out again. If you're transmasc, whether you're binary transmasculine or non-binary transmasculine, trans boys, trans men, please get in contact. The information is in the description and in the article that this podcast appears in. So like and subscribe. I don't think there's a bell on anymore, but but definitely like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And thanks for tuning in. I'm Andy Fontaine.
I'm Cyber Ninja, and next time I hope we'll have some tea.
I hope we will have some tea. Thanks for tuning in to the Trans Icelandic broadcast. Have a great day.
Bye.